True crime narration script. The Whisper in the Attic. The Hinterkaifeck Farm Murders. Opening music. Low, eerie strings fading into distant wind and creaking wood. Slow, ominous tone. Narrator. Deep, calm, building tension. Imagine a remote farm in the Bavarian countryside, 1922. Snow blankets the ground. The nearest town is a half-mile away. No streetlights. No neighbors close enough to hear screams. Just one isolated homestead called Hinterkaifeck, hidden behind Kaifeck, a place that would become the setting for one of Germany's most disturbing unsolved murders. A crime so chilling that over a century later it still feels like the killer might still be watching from the dark. Tonight, step into the snow with me, and listen for the footsteps that led straight to hell. Pause for effect, 3 seconds. The Gruber family wasn't like the others. Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, was a hard, bitter man with a reputation for violence. His wife, Cecilia, 72, had suffered through years of his temper. Their daughter, Victoria, 35, was a widow. Her husband, Karl, had died in the First World War. She lived on the farm with her 2 children, little Cecilia, just 7 years old, and 2-year-old Joseph. By all accounts, the family kept to themselves. They were known in the village, but not liked. Andreas had a dark secret that everyone whispered about. Years earlier, he had been convicted of incest with his own daughter, Victoria. The whole town knew. But in those days, such things were often buried under silence and shame. Life on the farm was quiet. Until it wasn't. In the weeks before the end, strange things began to happen. Andreas found a newspaper in his house that no one in the family had bought. Footprints appeared in the fresh snow, leading from the nearby woods directly to the barn. But no footprints leading back out. Someone had come. Someone had stayed. Then came the noises. Victoria and the maid at the time heard footsteps in the attic at night. Slow, deliberate creaks on the wooden boards above their heads. The previous maid quit in terror, claiming the house was haunted. She said she felt watched, constantly. Andreas laughed it off. Farmers didn't believe in ghosts, but Andreas himself started checking the attic. He found nothing, no one. Yet the feeling remained, like eyes in the dark, waiting. Pause. Lower voice. On March 31st, 1922, a new maid arrived. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She was 44 years old and had just taken the job that very day. It would be her first and her last. That evening, the family went about their routines. The children played. Dinner was made. The animals were fed. And then, something moved in the shadows. The killer struck late that night. He didn't come as a stranger breaking down doors. No, he knew the farm. He knew the layout. He lured most of the family into the barn under some pretense, perhaps calling them to check on an animal. First was old Andreas. One brutal swing of a mattock, the heavy pickaxe-like tool used for chopping roots and digging. His skull caved in. Then his wife, Cecilia. 7 savage blows, her face destroyed. Victoria was next. 9 star-shaped wounds to the head. The killer was strong, methodical, enraged. Little Cecilia, only 7, tried to hide or fight back. She survived the initial attack longer than the others. For hours she lay there in the hay beside her dead family, pulling out her own hair in clumps from shock and terror. The killer eventually finished her. Soft, horrified tone. Back in the house, the killer found 2-year-old Joseph in his crib. One heavy blow to the face. Then Maria, the new maid, in her bedroom. She had only been there a few hours. Crosswise blows to the head. She never stood a chance. The killer didn't flee. For the next 4 days, he lived in the house. He fed the cows. He fed the horses. He milked them. He cooked meals. He lit fires in the hearth. Smoke rose from the chimney while the bodies lay rotting in the barn and bedrooms. The family dog, a Pomeranian, was left alive and even cared for. Whoever did this felt right at home. Build tension with slower pace. On April 4th, neighbors finally grew worried. Young Cecilia hadn't been to school. Mail was piling up. No one had seen the family at church. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a local farmer who had once been involved with Victoria, led a search party with 2 neighbors. They approached the silent farm. Doors locked, no answer. They broke into the barn, and the horror hit them like a wave. 4 bodies lay under hay. Blood everywhere. Brains exposed. Faces unrecognizable. Then they entered the house. Little Joseph in his cot, covered with his mother's dress. Maria in her bed covered with sheets. The smell of death hung thick in the air. The police arrived. What they found only deepened the nightmare. No robbery. Money and valuables were untouched. The killer had taken his time. Footprints in the snow. The missing key. The attic sounds. And the most terrifying detail of all, the killer had likely been hiding in the attic for days, watching the family eat, sleep, and live. Before striking, pause 4 seconds. Lower, intimate voice. Who could do something so evil? Suspicion fell first on Lorenz Schlittenbauer himself. He had a past with Victoria. He had fathered little Joseph, according to some. There was bad blood with old Andreas. During the search, Schlittenbauer acted strangely, unlocking doors too easily, touching the bodies without horror. Later, he made comments only the killer should know, but police could never prove it. He died in 1941, still denying everything. Other suspects emerged over the years. Former farmhands, brothers from nearby towns. Even a theory involving a serial killer who crossed the ocean. But no arrests. No convictions. In 2007, police academy students re-examined the case with modern eyes. They agreed on one main suspect, but out of respect for living relatives, they never named him publicly. The case remains open, officially unsolved, climax darker tone. Think about those final days. Imagine being little Kazelia, lying wounded in the barn next to your slaughtered grandparents and mother. Hearing footsteps in the snow as the killer walks back to the warm house. Knowing he is still there, feeding the animals. Sleeping under the same roof. Imagine the new maid Maria, arriving excited for a new job, only to be murdered hours later. And the killer. Who was he? A jilted lover? A vengeful neighbor? Or something far worse, a stranger who simply walked out of the woods one day and decided this family would never leave alive. To this day, no one knows. The farm was demolished in 1923. The skulls of the victims were sent away for psychic examination and later lost in World War II. All that remains is a small shrine in the woods where the farm once stood, closing, reflective, chilling. If you ever find yourself driving through the Bavarian countryside near Weidhofen and the snow starts falling, listen carefully. They say on quiet nights, you can still hear the faint creak of footsteps in an attic that no longer exists. The Hinterkaifeck murders. One of the most unsettling true crime stories ever told. Because the killer didn't just murder 6 people, he lived with them first, watched them, and then made sure they suffered. Music swells, eerie strings into silence. What do you think happened at Hinterkaifeck? Was it someone the family knew? Or a monster from the woods who was never caught? Drop your theories in the comments. If you want more terrifying true crime stories, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Sleep well tonight, if you can. End screen. The end. Never forget Hinterkaifeck. Script notes for YouTube production. Word count 2,650. Approximately 14 to 16 minutes at a natural storytelling pace, with pauses for tension and dramatic effect. Delivery tips. Speak slowly during creepy details. Use long pauses after horrifying revelations. Background music should be subtle, ambient horror,